Black CEO thrown off yacht 5 minutes later. He bought the entire vessel. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Step off this yacht, now! The ocean was quiet, almost too quiet for a night that expensive. Golden light spilled from the yacht's deck, shimmering across designer gowns and crystal glasses. Laughter floated like perfume, delicate and exclusive. Then came a voice sharp, cold, meant to be heard. The music died mid-sax note. Dozens of heads turned toward the bar. A woman in a silver gown stood firm, her manicured hand trembling slightly, but her tone didn't. You're not on the list. This is a private event for investors. Marcus Reed didn't move, didn't blink. He stood steady, the ocean wind tugging gently at his lapel. Around him, the air thickened with the kind of silence that hides judgment. A man in a tuxedo chuckled near the railing. Probably wandered in from one of the crew boats. More laughter followed, thin, nervous, cruel. Marcus exhaled slowly, saying nothing. Calmness became his armor. He glanced toward the horizon, then back at her. You might want to check again. The hostess's eyes narrowed. Sir, please don't make this difficult. Security. From the far side of the deck, a guard approached heavy steps, authority in a black tie. It was always the same pattern, different setting, same tone. They never asked what you built, only why you were standing there. The hostess crossed her arms, waiting for him to flinch, but Marcus didn't. He straightened his tie, as if preparing for a meeting, not humiliation. Behind her, a young waiter froze mid-step, eyes flicking between them. His tray rattled. He'd seen this before, too, just from the other side of power. Sir, if you don't leave, we'll have to escort you off, the guard said. Marcus's reply was soft enough to cut deeper. Then escort carefully. You're on my payroll and don't know it yet. A faint murmur rolled through the crowd. The hostess blinked, confused. The guard hesitated, hand hovering near Marcus's arm. Respect here was currency, and they were broke. From the upper deck, champagne still sparkled, but the laughter had stopped. Every guest could feel it, that quiet storm right before humiliation flips to revelation. Marcus reached into his pocket, not for ID, but for his phone. His thumb hovered over one name, Evelyn, executive assistant. He didn't press it yet. The silence was worth more. A camera clicked. Someone was filming. Someone always was. Marcus turned slightly toward the lens, calm, unbothered, almost amused. Before we continue, he said evenly, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Oh, he looked back at the hostess. Now, he added quietly, back to me. Her lips parted, no words came out. Because even without saying who he was, everyone on that deck could feel it. He wasn't the intruder. He was the test. The guard's hand reached for Marcus's arm. It wasn't violent, just firm, practiced. The kind of touch that says we've done this before. Sir, we're asking you one last time, the hostess said, her tone clipped, professional, but shaking underneath. Step off this yacht. Her words rippled across the deck. Guests went quiet. The air changed colder now, brittle like glass about to crack. Marcus didn't move. He tilted his head, calm and almost curious. Do you always treat investors like trespassers? She blinked. Investors? A short, brittle laugh escaped. Nice try. A man by the bar whispered, he's bluffing. Another smirked, probably one of those social media stunts. The guard's grip tightened. Every insult sounded different but always felt the same. First, disbelief, then dismissal, then that moment when a stranger's hand reminded you they'd already decided who you were. Marcus looked at the guard's badge. Ocean Crest Management, a name he knew better than anyone he owned it. Quietly, entirely. He exhaled slowly. Tell your supervisor Marcus Reed is on deck. The guard frowned. And I'm supposed to know who that is? Before Marcus could answer, the hostess snapped, don't play games. Remove him now. The guard nodded once. He reached again, this time rougher. His palm landed on Marcus's shoulder. Phones came out. Guests leaned in, pretending not to watch. One young woman whispered, "This is wrong." Her boyfriend hissed, Stay out of it. They always said that stay out of it, until it was them. Marcus's voice stayed calm, almost measured. You're making a mistake that costs more than your paycheck. The guard hesitated, confusion flickering behind authority. The hostess stepped forward to mask it. We don't tolerate imposters. Not on my event. Your event? Marcus repeated softly, almost amused. Interesting, because last I checked, this vessel doesn't belong to you. She crossed her arms. Oh, please. And what, you own the ocean too? No one laughed this time. Something shifted that uneasy silence when arrogance meets consequence. Marcus finally took out his phone. One tap. Evelyn, he said quietly. Go ahead. A woman's voice echoed through the speaker, calm and deliberate. Understood, Mr. Reed. The transfer is complete. You now own the vessel Odyssey 4. Documentation time-stamped and filed. Silence fell heavier than any sound before it. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath. The hostess's face drained of color. The guard's hand dropped. Guests turned, their expressions torn between awe and guilt. Marcus straightened his jacket, eyes still calm. Next time you host a party, he said evenly, make sure you know whose deck you're standing on. He walked past them toward the railing. The crowd parted, stunned, like the waves that gave him passage. They had mistaken silence for submission. Now they understood silence had simply been patience. And patience, tonight, came with a title deed. No one spoke. The hum of the yacht's engines was the only sound left, steady and low, like a quiet confession. The night had changed. What was once laughter now felt like the aftermath of lightning. The hostess stood frozen, her silver gown catching the deck lights. This can't be real, she said, voice breaking. Someone verify that. He's lying. A man near the navigation booth scrolled through his tablet, eyes widening. He's not. The registry just updated. Odyssey 4, new ownership Marcus Reed Holdings. The whisper spread across the deck like a fuse. Guests pulled out their phones. The guard stepped back, the confidence draining from his posture. Marcus said nothing. He looked out at the horizon, face unreadable, as if the ocean itself were waiting for permission to move again. Power didn't need to announce itself. It simply arrived, and everyone felt smaller in its presence. The event manager hurried down from the upper deck, breathless. Sir, I just got the confirmation too. The transfer is legitimate. He looked terrified to even breathe in Marcus's direction. The hostess tried to recover her voice. I didn't know. You have to understand. I was only doing my job. Marcus turned slowly. His tone was calm but cut sharper than any shout. Your job, he said, was to recognize people before you humiliate them. Not after. She took a step back. Please, Mr. Reed, He didn't let her finish. Leave the deck. The guard looked between them, uncertain, then gave a small nod. Ma'am, please. The same hands that had reached for Marcus now opened the path for her to leave. She hesitated, eyes wet, but the crowd had already decided. Guests moved aside, forming an unspoken corridor of silence. Some looked down, others murmured quiet words of respect. As she passed, someone clapped once. Then another joined. It wasn't loud, not celebratory, just heavy, like the sound of balance being restored. The hostess paused at the stairs. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely audible. Marcus looked at her, not angry, not proud, simply resolute. So am I, he said, because this could have been avoided if respect came before assumption. She lowered her head and disappeared below deck. The air that followed her exit felt lighter, as if the sea itself exhaled. The event manager approached again, nervous. Mr. Reed, should we resume the event? Marcus's gaze swept across the yacht, the tables, the lights, the people too quiet for a celebration. No, he said. Shut it down. There was no protest, no hesitation. Orders from him didn't echo. They landed like truth. Guests started leaving in quiet clusters, their expensive shoes tapping against the deck that no longer felt like theirs. Some offered quick nods. Others whispered, thank you, under their breath, the kind of gratitude born from witnessing fairness in real time. Marcus remained still, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the sea. Justice had arrived quietly, without spectacle. It didn't need noise, it only needed timing. For the first time that night, the ocean seemed calm for a reason. The deck emptied slowly, like a stage after the final act. Laughter had long vanished, leaving behind only whispers and the soft rhythm of the sea. Champagne glasses stood half full, glimmering under the fading light. Marcus remained by the railing, watching the reflection of the city shimmer on the water. The night air was cooler now, calm, honest, no longer pretending to be perfect. He pulled out his phone and spoke quietly. "Evelyn, triple pay for the crew. They handled themselves with grace tonight." "Yes, sir," came her voice. "And Ocean Crest's management?" "Remove them from all active contracts by morning." A pause. "Anything else?" Marcus thought for a moment, eyes still on the horizon. "Send invitations to everyone who witnessed tonight, the ones who watched, the ones who filmed. They'll be the first to see our next campaign." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived in measured breaths, calm and undeniable. A soft voice broke the quiet. "Mr. Reed?" It was the young waiter from earlier, the one whose tray had rattled during the argument. He stood near the railing, nervous but determined. "I just wanted to say, that was incredible." Marcus turned to him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "No," he said gently, "it was necessary." The young man hesitated, then nodded. "People like her, they do this a lot. I've seen it before." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "Then let it make you sharper, not colder," he said. "Anger fades, precision stays." The waiter lowered his eyes, as if trying to memorize the sentence. Behind them, the city lights flickered against the waves, and the Odyssey 4 rocked softly in its berth, a vessel reborn under a steadier hand. Marcus turned toward the exit ramp. His steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing across the deck like punctuation at the end of a story. The same security guard who'd grabbed his arm earlier now held the rope open, head bowed in quiet apology. Marcus gave a small nod, neither cold nor forgiving, just final. At the dock, the hostess waited beside her car, still in her silver gown, mascara streaked by salt air. When she saw him approach, she braced herself for punishment. But Marcus only said, "You don't need to remember my name, just remember how close you came to losing everything over a glance." Her eyes filled again. She didn't reply. He walked past her and stepped into the black SUV waiting by the pier. The driver closed the door softly, and the car rolled forward. Through the window, Marcus watched the reflection of the yacht fade behind him, smaller, quieter, but now entirely his. They would tell this story in different ways. Some would call it arrogance. Others would call it justice. But for Marcus, it was balance, the kind that didn't need witnesses, only understanding. He leaned back in his seat and murmured almost to himself, "Respect shouldn't be a luxury." The city lights stretched across the windshield. The ocean stayed behind, vast and calm, as if finally content to rest. The drive back to the city was quiet. No music, no phone calls, just the hum of the engine and the rhythm of streetlights sliding across the tinted glass. Marcus sat still, eyes half closed, letting the silence breathe. Every once in a while, moments like tonight returned him to where it all began. A 22-year-old kid in a cheap suit turned away from a corporate lobby because the dress code didn't fit the brand. He had smiled back then, too, the same calm expression he wore tonight. But back then, it was to hide anger. Now, it was to master it. The car slowed at a red light. Across the street, a young couple was arguing with a valet who clearly didn't believe they belonged in the restaurant behind him. Marcus watched for a second. The body language was familiar. The disbelief, the little smirk, the defensiveness born of insecurity. He rolled down the window slightly, just enough to hear the tension. "Sir, I'm telling you, this is a reservation. Only space." "And I'm telling you," the man said, "we have a reservation." Marcus didn't intervene. He didn't have to. The valet's manager arrived seconds later, recognized the couple, and hurried to open the door with an apology. The light turned green. Marcus smiled faintly as the SUV moved on. The world corrected itself sometimes, if you gave it a reason to remember. Downtown shimmered ahead, a skyline of glass and ambition. Somewhere up there, Reed Maritime Holdings headquarters stood like a monument of quiet resilience. On the 47th floor, employees were still working late, finishing reports that carried his name on every page. His phone buzzed once. A message from Evelyn. "Trending. Number the Yacht CEO 1. 8M views in an hour." Marcus read it, then turned off the screen. It wasn't about the views. The world loved justice when it was cinematic. But real justice was quieter, something you carried, not something you posted. He leaned his head back, eyes closing for a moment. The hum of the road felt almost like the ocean again. In his mind, the image replayed the hostess's trembling hand, the waiter's nervous eyes, the crowd's silence when truth arrived. Not vengeance, not victory, just weight lifting off the air. He thought of his father's words, long ago. If they ever question where you belong, son, don't raise your voice, raise your presence. Marcus smiled at the memory. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about reminding himself that he never needed to. The SUV pulled up to a high-rise tower draped in glass and light. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and nodded. Marcus paused before getting out, glancing once more at the horizon where the sea met the city, two worlds that never touched, but reflected each other perfectly. He stepped onto the sidewalk, straightened his suit, and walked through the revolving doors. The night wind followed him briefly, carrying the faint scent of salt water, a reminder that respect, like the tide, always returns to its rightful level. Inside, the elevator doors closed with a soft chime. His reflection stared back, calm, composed, unshaken. The city moved on. The story spread. But Marcus Reed was already thinking of tomorrow, because justice wasn't a moment. It was maintenance, and he intended to keep it that way. The morning sun rose over the city like a truth that couldn't stay hidden. Screens lit up everywhere, office lobbies, cafes, phones in subway hands. The headline was simple, elegant, and ruthless. Black CEO thrown off yacht buys the entire vessel 5 minutes later. Clips from the night before looped on every platform. The silver-dressed hostess, the confrontation, the calm man who never raised his voice. Someone had filmed everything, and the internet had turned it into poetry. Comments poured in by the millions. He didn't shout. He just owned the ocean. That's not revenge, that's elegance. This is why silence is power. Across social feeds, the hashtag number the Yacht CEO burned like fire. But Marcus Reed hadn't posted once. His account stayed silent. That silence only made the story louder. In the lobby of Reed Maritime Holdings, reporters gathered like tidewater. Employees slipped past them quietly, heads high with pride. For years, they'd seen their boss walk the line between visibility and dignity. Now the world finally saw it too. Evelyn, standing at the front desk, scrolled through her phone. Another journalist called for comment. She smiled politely and said what Marcus always taught her. No statement. The story speaks for itself. Inside his office on the 47th floor, Marcus looked out over the harbor. The Odyssey 4 sat at its dock, sunlight flashing against its polished rails, calm again, almost grateful. He turned from the window as Evelyn entered with a stack of reports. Morning coverage is everywhere, she said, even international outlets. BBC, Reuters, Tokyo Finance Daily. Marcus nodded. How's the staff taking it? They're proud, she said. Some said it feels like justice finally made the front page. He smiled faintly. Justice doesn't trend forever. Let's make sure integrity does. Evelyn hesitated. The hostess sent a message through her lawyer. She wants to apologize in person. Marcus looked at the water again, far below. No need. She's already part of the lesson. He walked to his desk, pressed play on a muted video of the incident. The crowd, the words, the silence, it all replayed exactly as he remembered. Calm, controlled, certain. For a moment, his expression softened, not from pride, but from recognition that somewhere a young black man or woman was watching this clip, learning that dignity could be louder than fury. In the marina that afternoon, tourists gathered near the Odyssey 4, snapping photos of the yacht that had become a symbol overnight. One sign taped near the dock read, "Respect lives here." Marcus's phone buzzed another message, another headline. He ignored it. Instead, he wrote a single note in his planner for the week ahead. Launch Foundation, the Dignity Project. He closed the notebook and looked toward the horizon. The world had seen his moment of power. Now it would see his purpose. Because for Marcus Reed, the story wasn't about humiliation or triumph. It was about what came after, how you used silence once it finally belonged to you. The press conference was set for noon. No yacht, no champagne, just glass walls, daylight, and truth. Dozens of reporters filled the atrium of Reed Maritime Holdings, their cameras humming like anxious insects. They weren't here for a scandal anymore. They were here for a message. Marcus stood backstage, adjusting his cufflinks, the same navy suit he wore that night, pressed but unchanged. A reminder. Evelyn leaned close. You ready? He smiled faintly. I was ready 5 minutes after they told me to leave that yacht. When he stepped onto the stage, the noise died instantly. No music, no fanfare, just presence. "I know why you're here," he began, voice low but steady. "You want a headline. You already have one, but what you don't have is context." He paused, letting silence do the work. Cameras clicked, breaths held. "That night wasn't about me," he continued. "It was about a mirror, a reflection of what happens every day when judgment walks in before reason." He looked across the crowd faces of every color, expression, and class. "I didn't buy that yacht to prove power. I bought it to prove perspective, to remind people that dignity isn't negotiable." A murmur rippled through the room. Reporters glanced at one another. They weren't getting sound bites. They were getting conviction. Marcus pressed a button on the podium. Behind him, a large screen lit up with the words, "The Dignity Project Education. Access. Equity. We're funding scholarships, mentorship programs, and cultural education initiatives in coastal communities," he said. "Because respect, like the sea, has no color. It just reflects whatever stands above it." Applause began slowly, then built like a tide. Not for spectacle, but for resonance. Evelyn stepped forward with a folder. "We already have 12 companies pledging support," she whispered. Marcus nodded slightly, still facing the crowd. "This isn't charity," he said into the mic. "It's correction. It's not about shame, it's about sight. When you can see people clearly, you can't mistreat them quietly." The room fell silent again. It wasn't the silence of discomfort this time, it was the sound of thought. He closed the folder, looking directly at the front row, where a few young journalists sat, notebooks shaking in their hands. "Some of you will write about yachts and revenge," he said, "but I hope at least one of you writes about redemption." Oh, outside, the city roared with life. Taxis honked, the sea shimmered, and a banner hung from the building's facade. "The Dignity Project, because respect shouldn't be a luxury." As Marcus stepped off stage, reporters shouted questions he didn't answer. He didn't need to. The message was already bigger than the man. He walked through the glass doors into sunlight, where cameras kept flashing. Evelyn caught up, smiling. "You know this is going global, right?" Marcus glanced at the horizon, the ocean glinting beyond the skyline. "Good," he said. "Then maybe next time, someone will think before they reach for security." He kept walking unhurried, unbothered, unshaken, a man, no longer proving anything, just building something that would outlive the noise. Within 24 hours, the Dignity Project crossed oceans faster than any ship Marcus had ever owned. News anchors called it a new language of justice. Talk shows debated it. Editorials praised its calm defiance. Even late-night hosts, the ones who usually turned pain into punchlines, ended their monologues with his quote, "Respect shouldn't be a luxury." In Paris, a magazine printed his photo on the cover. Marcus standing against the city skyline, captioned, "The man who bought back dignity." In Cape Town, a business school professor played the Yacht video to a room of young entrepreneurs, asking, "What would you have done differently?" In Tokyo, a transport executive quoted Marcus's speech to his staff, reminding them that humility and excellence are twins, not opposites. Online, the ripple had become a wave. The hashtag number, "The Dignity Project," filled with stories from everywhere. A waitress who refused to let a customer belittle her accent. A college student defending a janitor from mockery. A young man starting a mentorship group in his neighborhood. Marcus watched from his office one evening, the city's lights flickering like tiny beacons of consequence. Evelyn entered, tablet in hand. "We've had over 6,000 applications for scholarships," she said, "and 50 corporate partners ready to fund expansions." He smiled. "Not bad for a story that started with a mistake." Evelyn looked at him. "It wasn't a mistake, sir. It was a mirror." Her words lingered. Outside, the harbor glowed gold against the dusk. Messages poured in every hour from activists, teachers, and CEOs who'd once stayed silent in the face of bias. Some asked to collaborate. Others simply said thank you. For Marcus, it wasn't about thanks. It was about traction. Justice had momentum now, not fueled by outrage, but by imitation. At a cafe in Atlanta, 2 teenage boys argued over who Marcus Reed was. "He's the guy who got kicked off that yacht," one said. "Nah," the other replied. "He's the guy who bought it and turned it into a movement." In Lagos, a journalist closed her report with a line that trended worldwide. "He didn't just own a yacht, he owned the moment." Meanwhile, In classrooms across the U.S., teachers played clips from his press conference. One student raised her hand and said softly, "He didn't embarrass them, he educated them." Marcus heard about that through Evelyn later that night. For the first time in years, he leaned back in his chair and let himself exhale. The work had only begun, but something had shifted the narrative itself. He looked out at the skyline, the same one that once seemed indifferent to stories like his. Now, it carried his reflection. The world wasn't just watching anymore, it was listening. He picked up his pen and wrote a single line at the top of a blank page. Next, the Dignity Summit 1 year later. Then he set the pen down, folded his hands, and smiled. The yacht had been the beginning. The movement was the voyage. And the sea, once a place of exile, was now the echo of his purpose. 1 year later, the same city that once whispered about the yacht now gathered to hear a man speak about the sea. The Dignity Summit filled the International Convention Hall. Thousands of people from 50 countries, students, executives, community leaders, diplomats. The air buzzed with expectation, not for spectacle, but for substance. The stage was minimalist, just a glass podium, a deep blue backdrop, and a single word projected in white light: respect. As Marcus stepped out, applause rolled through the hall like a soft tide. He paused, taking in the faces, every shade, every language, every story represented in one room. He smiled faintly. "A year ago," he began, "I stood on a deck where people questioned if I belonged. Today, I stand before a world asking how we all can." The room stilled. Cameras clicked. He continued. "The Dignity Project started with one incident and assumption, but it grew because that assumption wasn't mine alone. Every person here has faced a moment where someone decided who they were before they even spoke." He let the silence breathe, then added, "We're here to change that, not by shouting louder, but by listening longer." Behind him, the screen flickered to a montage footage from around the world. In Nairobi, a school with new computers labeled Dignity Tech Lab. In Manila, a program teaching public servants empathy training. In Detroit, young interns in clean uniforms reading their first corporate badges, Reed Foundation scholars. The applause this time was steady, full of pride. Evelyn watched from backstage, hands clasped. She'd seen this man transform a moment of humiliation into an empire of meaning. Marcus looked out again. "We've raised $480 million in partnerships," he said. "But what matters more than money is mindset, because inequality doesn't start in policy, it starts in perception." He took a breath. "And the cure for perception is proximity, seeing, knowing, respecting." A group of students in the front row rose to their feet first. Then others followed, slow, sincere, until the entire room stood in quiet unity. When the applause finally subsided, Marcus leaned closer to the mic. "A ship doesn't need the world's approval to sail. It just needs direction, and so do we." He closed his folder, nodded once, and stepped away from the podium. No grand ending. No orchestra swell. Just calm power walking off stage, the kind that doesn't end with applause, but with action. Outside the hall, a reporter shouted, "Mr. Reed, what do you say to those who think the Dignity Project is just symbolism?" Marcus stopped, smiled lightly, and replied, "Symbols don't change the world. People do. But sometimes, a symbol reminds them they still can." He walked toward the waiting car. The crowd parted, cameras flashing, not as paparazzi this time, but as witnesses. Above the summit hall, banners rippled in the wind. "Respect not requested, required." And for the first time, Marcus felt something bigger than vindication. Have felt legacy. 2 months after the Dignity Summit, the applause had faded, replaced by something quieter, sharper. Scrutiny. Editorials began to shift tone. Is Marcus Reed building a movement or a brand? Philanthropy or power play? Talk shows dissected his calmness, calling it calculated. Commentators who once praised his restraint now questioned his motives. It didn't surprise him. Every movement met its storm eventually. And storms, he'd learned, don't destroy ships, they reveal who built them. Inside his office, the air was heavy with news reports. Evelyn scrolled through the headlines. "They're calling it the charity complex," she said softly. "Some think you're using the Dignity Project to influence policy." Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes on the skyline. They confuse intention with control. When power doesn't look like them, they call it strategy. Evelyn hesitated. "Do you want to respond?" He shook his head. No, silence got us here. Silence will carry us through. But that night, even silence felt heavier. The criticism wasn't just noise, it came with consequences. Sponsors began pausing funds, citing political neutrality. Government representatives requested audits. A few corporate allies quietly stepped back. By the third week, his calendar was full of cancellations. Marcus walked into the boardroom the next morning to face a dozen executives, anxious, whispering, shifting papers like shields. One finally spoke. "Sir, public opinion is turning. If we don't issue a statement," Marcus interrupted calmly, "then we stand for nothing. Because if a cause only works when it's convenient, it was never a cause." The room fell silent. He walked to the window, looking out at the same harbor where it had all begun. The Odyssey 4 still sat there, shining in the sunlight, constant, loyal, unmoved. He turned back to them. "Do you know why the yacht still matters?" No one answered. "Because that's where truth met arrogance," he said. "And we're back there again. Different faces, same fear people don't mind progress until it starts changing the order they built." Evelyn watched him closely. She'd seen that look before, not anger, not fatigue, but precision. He picked up his pen, wrote a note on a scrap of paper, and handed it to her. It read, "Host town hall. No press, just people." She nodded. "When?" "Tomorrow night," he said. "If they think this movement is a brand, let them see the faces it belongs to." The next evening, hundreds filled a community: gym workers, students, single mothers, elders, men in uniforms, women in business suits. No cameras, no filters, just truth. When Marcus stepped onto the small wooden stage, the applause was short, honest, raw. He looked around and said quietly, "They're asking if I built this for power. But the truth is simpler. I built it because I got tired of watching people ask for respect like it was a favor." Ugh. The crowd rose to their feet, not in excitement and recognition, because the Dignity Project was never about image. It was about inheritance, a promise passed, hand to hand, heart to heart, louder than politics, stronger than pride. And in that moment, Marcus knew something vital. Movements don't fail when the world doubts them. They fail when they start doubting themselves. By the end of the month, the headlines had turned hostile. Talk shows dissected him nightly. Clips from his summit cut out of context. Words twisted into weapons. One commentator sneered on live television, "Marcus Reed wants to redefine respect, maybe because he can't handle authority." The clip went viral. Hashtags split the internet in half. Supporters fought critics. Memes replaced meaning. At Reed Maritime Holdings, staff morale wavered. A few employees resigned quietly. Partnerships froze. Board members whispered about brand stability. Evelyn walked into his office one evening, holding her phone. "They're calling for a government inquiry. Accusations of misuse of charity funds." Marcus didn't look surprised. "They can audit everything. Our ledgers are cleaner than their politics." She sighed. "They're not after truth, Marcus. They're after doubt." Outside, thunder rolled across the harbor, a storm brewing over the same waters that once reflected his calm. That night, Marcus stood alone in his penthouse, watching lightning crawl across the sky. His reflection in the window looked almost foreign. A man, respected, yet questioned, powerful, yet painted as dangerous. He remembered his father's voice. "If you ever shake the system, son, expect the system to shake back." He exhaled, slow and steady. Then, with deliberate precision, picked up his phone and called Evelyn. "Schedule a press conference. No teleprompter. No scripts." The next day, the entire city tuned in. The hall was packed: journalists, officials, critics, and supporters standing shoulder to shoulder. Marcus walked to the podium. Cameras flashed like lightning. He didn't raise his hand for quiet, he simply began speaking. "They're calling this an investigation," he said, his tone level almost calm. "But let's call it what it is: resistance. Not against me, but against accountability." He paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. "They say the Dignity Project is political. They're right, because respect is political when it's denied. Fairness is political when it's missing." The room hushed. Some reporters lowered their cameras. "They accuse us of power," he continued. "But power built on equity isn't domination, it's correction. And if that threatens anyone, maybe they were never leaders, just beneficiaries." Murmurs rippled through the hall. "You can audit my books," Marcus said, voice steady. "But you can't audit intent. You can't measure conviction in currency. You can't subpoena integrity. He leaned forward, hands on the podium. And if you want to question how we built this, start by asking why you didn't. The silence afterward was immense, the kind that made even cameras forget to blink. Evelyn watched from the side, a mix of fear and pride tightening in her chest. She knew what this moment meant. He'd stopped defending himself. He was defending the idea. Outside, the storm broke fully rain, slamming the glass, thunder answering his words like applause from the sky. When Marcus stepped away from the podium, drenched in flashlights and flashes of truth, he didn't look defeated. He looked inevitable, because storms, he thought, don't destroy ships. They test captains. The storm lasted 3 days. Rain hammered the city, thunder rolled over the harbor, and headlines screamed louder than truth. But when the clouds finally cleared, something unexpected happened. People stopped listening to the noise. They started replaying the words. Clips from Marcus's press conference flooded back online, unedited this time. His calmness cut through the static. The full video went viral again, not as controversy, but as clarity. News anchors, once skeptical, began walking back their angles. Maybe Reed wasn't defending himself, maybe he was defining something larger. On the morning of the 4th day, the Financial Ethics Bureau released its audit. No irregularities, all accounts transparent. The story shifted instantly. Critics disappeared. Supporters returned, not triumphant, but vindicated. The dignity movement had survived the storm without raising its voice. Marcus arrived at the office that morning to find his staff waiting. No cameras, no speeches, just people standing in quiet respect. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes bright. "It's over," she said softly. He nodded. "No, it's beginning again." She smiled. She knew what he meant. Later that evening, he stood on the rooftop terrace of his building. The skyline glittered in the distance, the sea stretching beyond it, vast, patient, endless. He could see the Odyssey 4 anchored below, steady under the moonlight. For a long moment, he said nothing. The city moved quietly beneath him, like an audience that had finally learned to listen. He thought of everything the year had brought: humiliation, revelation, movement, resistance, and now peace. Not the kind you win, the kind you earn. He remembered his father's words. When you've said all there is to say, let silence finish the sentence. Marcus took a slow breath and looked down at the reflection of the yacht, glimmering like a promise kept. Behind him, Evelyn approached with a small box. "They had this made for you," she said. Inside, a plaque engraved with his own words. "Respect shouldn't be a luxury." He smiled faintly. "It never was," he said. She asked quietly, "What's next?" He turned to the horizon. "We stop talking about dignity," he said. "We start building systems that can't function without it." Down below, the city lights rippled across the water movement. Energy, consequence. The kind that no speech could command, only inspire. For a moment, the world felt balanced again. Not perfect, not fixed, just aligned. Marcus closed his eyes. The sound of the wind filled the silence where applause used to be. And in that stillness, there was power steady, undeniable, earned. He whispered to himself, almost smiling. So this is what power sounds like when it's quiet. The night answered with nothing but calm. And that, Marcus thought, was enough.